How to knit the brioche stitch like a pro. Hi everyone. Today's video is all about the wonderful squishy world of brioche knitting. I want to show you how to knit the basic pattern, how to knit it in two colors in the round, how to increase and decrease, how to knit extra, need selvage stitches. But above all, I want to show you some tips and tricks, because once you understand the basic concept, brioche knitting is actually very easy, even fixing mistakes with a crochet hook. Let's dive right into it. Let's start slow and simple and show you the basics of brioche knitting. To start, cast on an even number of stitches using a standard long tail cast on. And from here you can turn your work around and we will have to knit one preparation row. So one preparation row, and you only have to knit this row once. So we will start with a simple knit stitch. This is going to be our selvage stitch, and from here the repeat goes like this. So you knit one stitch and then you slip one stitch purlwise with yarn held in front, and then you add a yarn over. That's already the full repeat. So knit one stitch, bring the yarn to the front, slip one stitch purlwise with yarn held in front, and add a yarn over. Knit one stitch, bring the yarn to the front, and now you can do the yarn over and the slipping at the same time. See how I did that? Again, so knit one stitch, and then I bring the yarn to the front, enter all the way here, and then I can slip and do the yarn over at the same time. Just like so. And then I end the row with another simple knit stitch. This is going to be our selvage stitch. And now I turn around, and from here you can start brioche knitting in earnest. Again, I start my row with a simple knit stitch, and then if you take a close look, you can always see these little purl stitches followed by these weird double stitches where the yarn over crosses. These double stitches are often called brioche knit, abbreviated BRK, bark sometimes. And you always knit these together, see? You always knit them together. And then here, this purl stitch, you always bring the yarn to the front, slip it purlwise, and then add a yarn over. Again, so here we have the double stitch, and you knit that together, bring the yarn to the front, and again, you can do it at the same time. Slip and do the yarn over. Knit together, and slip and add the yarn over. And it's almost impossible to miss these double stitches, but if you are unsure, you always need to slip the stitches with this little purl bump here at their base. And that, my dear friends, is already the full secret to brioche knitting. We will end the row here with another knit stitch, and from here you just continue. So you keep this one stitch garter stitch selvage on the edges, and then you just knit all the stitches as they appear. Now here in the next row, these purl bumps, they have two wraps around. One is the yarn over, one is the actual purl stitch, but you still slip them and add a yarn over. They just appear to be a little bit bigger, but that's about it. So from here, you just continue working across in this exact pattern until you reach the desired length. A couple of rows later, you will be able to see how the characteristic ribs of the brioche stitch finally emerge. Same here on the other side. It is a fully reversible pattern. Now, if you take a closer look at your swatch, you might notice that the cast on isn't especially pretty, and it's not even stretchy enough. And here, those sides, well, they're not the neatest, and then they're not symmetrical either. Same here on the other side. So let's quickly talk about how you can improve that. Now listen closely, because this is the most important bit you should learn in this video. Brioche knitting and the brioche stitch is nothing else but double knitting. So let me show you. If I push these ribs here together, see? It almost looks like stockinette stitch. I can do the same here on the other side as well. If I push these ribs together, it looks like stockinette stitch. And in fact, there is a very similar pattern called double stockinette stitch, which is a fully reversible version of the stockinette stitch and a simple way to achieve double knitting. Let's show you how to do that. So in double stockinette stitch, you knit the first stitch, then you bring the yarn to the front, but now you slip purlwise without the yarn over and knit. Slip purlwise, and you don't add a yarn over. So essentially, brioche knitting is nothing else but double knitting, where you will accidentally catch the yarn here on top of your needle before you knit another stitch. So in a way, brioche knitting can be seen as botched double knitting. But in adding the yarn over, instead of just slipping like so, you are adding a lot more slack. And that is precisely the reason why you are creating these ribs here. Let's put that knowledge to very good use. So if brioche knitting is nothing else but double knitting, we can start with a simple double knitting cast on, aka the Italian cast on. So we are going to start with a simple twisted loop like so. Saw this? Like so. And then the repeat for the Italian cast on couldn't be easier. So you dive in below the yarn towards your thumb and grab the yarn towards your index finger from above. First stitch, or rather second. And then you do the opposite. You go around the yarn towards your index finger and grab the yarn towards your thumb from above. That was already the full repeat. Let's do that one more time. Go around the yarn towards your thumb and grab the yarn towards your index finger from above, and then go around the yarn towards your index finger and grab the yarn towards your thumb from above. And for this swatch, we are going to cast on an even number of stitches plus 5. So we will have 5 or selvage stitches. So in this case, I am going to cast on 15 stitches. That loop here at the beginning counts as your first stitch. Okay, so with my 15 stitches on the needle, it's time to knit the preparation row. It's important that you turn around the needle like this, so counterclockwise. Otherwise, this very first stitch will unravel. That's not what we want. We want a firm and stable first stitch. So turn around counterclockwise. And then we need to knit the preparation row. But on top of that, we are going to add our selvage stitches. We have a 3-stitch selvage, and the repeat goes like this. Knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front, knit 1. Now you will notice that these stitches, every second stitch appears to be twisted, so we are going to knit that through the back loop, just in the first row. Then I'm gonna slip one with yarn in front. So just like the double knitting swatch I just showed you, and then we are going to knit one. And from here we can start with our preparation row like this. So slip one purlwise and then add the yarn over. Here, this next stitch here is twisted, so you're going to knit it through the back loop and then slip one and do a yarn over. Knit one through the back loop, slip one and do a yarn over, knit through the back loop, and continue like that until there are only 3 stitches left. And you should end with a stitch where you slip one purlwise with yarn in front and do a yarn over. And then you knit another stitch, slip one purlwise, don't add the yarn over, and finish with another knit stitch. That was the preparation row. Let's turn around and knit our first real row. For the back side, the repeat for the selvage goes like this. Slip one purlwise with yarn held in front and knit one stitch, and then slip another stitch purlwise with yarn held in front. And then you can switch over to the standard brioche repeat, where you knit these 2 stitches together, followed by slipping and yarn over. Knit the brioche knits together and slip and yarn over. So that bit should be easy. All you need to pay attention to is these last stitches here, and here again you slip that with yarn in front, knit one and slip with yarn held in front, and then you turn around and on the front side you repeat. So here the repeat for the selvage stitch is again knit one, slip one purlwise with yarn held in front, knit one, and then you transition over to your regular brioche pattern. So let's finish that row, because from here onwards you can easily repeat things. So knit one, slip one purlwise with yarn in front, knit one, turn around, and on the wrong side you start by slipping purlwise, knit one, slipping purlwise with yarn held in front before you transition to your regular brioche stitch knitting. So a couple of rows later, this will be the results. So you have these beautiful well-rounded edges here on both sides, and then this cast on edge that is almost invisible. This would be the look here on the wrong side, or back side rather, where these ridges are a little bit wider. Now this selvage and this cast on is a personal preference. Maybe you enjoy the garter stitch selvage more, then please do that. Whatever you prefer, you probably have been thinking about, well, if brioche knitting is indeed double knitting, well, can't you do it with 2 colors then? Yes, indeed you can, and actually I think this is where this pattern truly shines. However, before I can do that, I need to show you how to knit the brioche stitch pattern in the round. This might sound totally counterintuitive, but I promise you it will make sense in a second. So let's show you that first. So here is how to knit the brioche stitch in the round. First of all, cast on an even number of stitches using a standard long tail cast on, and then join in the round. It's important that you cast on an even number. And then you need to knit one preparation row again, and the repeat goes like this. Purl one stitch, and then slip one yarn over. Purl one, slip one yarn over. Purl one stitch, slip one yarn over. Purl one stitch, slip one yarn over across the full row. So just continue knitting that simple repeat. Pay attention here at the gaps that you don't accidentally miss the yarn over or drop the yarn over. And by the way, you can of course knit with circulars as well. It doesn't matter, just use whatever you prefer. The repeat for the second round is pretty easy because it's the standard brioche repeat. So you slip one purlwise, yarn over, and you knit together. Slip one purlwise, yarn over, knit together, slip one purlwise, knit together. So it's just the standard brioche repeat, and you knit across the full round using that repeat. I think it should be pretty familiar by now. The big change comes here in the third round. Suddenly you have double stitches here, but there's a purl stitch here at the base. See this little bump here? Whereas the single stitches here, there's a V at the base. So in the third round, you need to switch things up. You need to bring the yarn to the front, and now you have to purl the double stitches together, but you slip the single stitches the normal way. It's just the double stitches here. Pay attention, you need to purl them together. So the repeat is slip one purlwise with the yarn in front and add a yarn over and then purl two together. And then in the next round you are back to the familiar pattern. You slip one purlwise with yarn held in front and add a yarn over, and then you knit two together. So if you want to knit the brioche stitch in the round, you have to alternate between these two rounds. So the one is slip one and knit together, and the other is purl two together, slip one yarn over. These two rounds. Let's take a quick break so we can fully understand the repeat for the brioche stitch in the round, and I'm using my flat swatch to explain. It doesn't take a grand genius to understand that the brioche stitch is a form of ribbing. So here are the knit columns and those are the purl columns. Some even call this pattern the fisherman's rib stitch. It's a different technique to arrive at the exact same outcome, and if you are interested you'll find my tutorial up in here. But just to make this clear, fisherman's rib stitch and brioche stitch, the fabric is the same, but just some find brioche stitch easier and some fisherman's rib stitch. What's more important is that brioche stitch is not only a form of double knitting, you are basically cheating. You are knitting every row twice. In the first pass, you are knitting all these stitches here connected to the ribs. So here I am knitting into these stitches. I am adding one row, whereas these purl stitches here connected to the purl ridges, I'm just slipping them. I mean, I'm adding a yarn over, but I'm not adding a row. I'm only adding a row here for these knit columns. So if I was to slip all the remaining stitches here of this row, well, nothing would happen. I wouldn't add any fabric. So in brioche stitch, you are always knitting every row twice. But then I turn around, and now I have to knit all the purl stitches. But because I am on the wrong side, all these purl stitches, see, all these purl stitches appear as knit stitches. And that's why I get away with knitting them together. So essentially, you are knitting every row twice, and because here I am working on the wrong side, I can cheat and never have to purl a single stitch. So, in the first pass of the repeat, you are slipping all the purl stitches and knitting the knit stitches. See, you can already see these little ridges starting to form. So this is the first round. And then in the second pass, you are purling all the stitches. But now you cannot turn around anymore. You are stuck here in the round. That's why you purl them together. But again, you can read your knitting. So here these double stitches. See how there is this bump at its base? This means it's a purl stitch, and that's why you purl them together. Just like before, it will take quite some time until the pattern emerges, so be patient. And I guess this is a good moment to clear up some brioche terminology. So most patterns will call this action here, so where you purl two together, a double stitch with a bump at its base, they will call this a burp, a BRP, a brioche purl stitch. That's what you find in a lot of brioche patterns. So if it says burp BRP, then this means you need to purl it together, and the opposite here for the front of your brioche project, where you have to knit a double stitch together. This is a bark, a BRK, a brioche knit. That's what they say. Now, personally speaking, I always found this terminology is a little bit confusing, and probably one of the main reasons why so many beginners shy away from brioche knitting, but maybe that's just my personal opinion. Anyway, that's how to knit the brioche stitch in the round. Now, let's put this hard-earned knowledge to good use and knit the two-colored brioche stitch. So, if you want to understand two-colored brioche, you need to understand this trick for one row stripe. So, I'm here using the yellow color to knit across this row. And normally, here at the very end of your row, you would have to turn around so that your yarn you're working on ends up here at the beginning of your row again, but I'm not going to do this. Instead, I slide my work back, and then I simply knit across with the blue yarn to achieve these super neat one row stripes. Isn't this genius? And now both my colors are here on the same side. This means I can turn around, then I pick up my yellow yarn and I purl back to the start. And if you understand this little trick, two-colored brioche will be a breeze. So here's how to knit the two-colored brioche stitch. First, we need to cast on an odd number of stitches. Now you can use any cast on of your choice. I'm going to start with a slip knot, and I'm going to cast on around 2 needles. And now I'm not going to do a standard long tail cast on, so I'm not inserting my needles here into the loop around my thumb. Rather, I am going to cast on purl stitches, and to do that I'm going to insert my needle here through the loop around the index finger, and then I'm gonna grab the yarn here towards the thumb from below. Let's do that one more time. Slingshot, go here around the loop around your index finger, and then grab the yarn here towards the thumb. Let go and tighten up. So this is how you cast on purl stitches. And you will notice or see why that is important in a second. It creates, if you ask me, a nicer transition. I have a slow motion tutorial of the purlwise cast on over on my blog, so if this is too fast for you, then kindly watch that. Again, we need an odd number of stitches. Okay, so I cast on 17 stitches here, and now I'm going to remove one of my double pointed knitting needles. This is another important aspect. For the two-colored brioche stitch, you need to work with double-pointed knitting needles or circulars. You can't do it with single-pointed knitting needles. You will see why in a second. And then you simply knit across using the standard repeat, or rather you start with a selvage stitch. So you knit one stitch, and then you do slip one yarn over, knit one, slip one yarn over, knit one, slip one yarn over, knit one. So the familiar preparation row. So far everything is the same. And then you finish with a knit stitch. And now comes the important bit. Now you need to slide your project back to the other end of the knitting needle. That's why you need circulars or double-pointed knitting needles. I mean, you could slip across stitches with your single-pointed knitting needles, but I'm not sure if that's gonna be fun. And then we need to join in another yarn. So I'm going to slip this first stitch here. I'm going to slip that. And now, here comes the important bit. So, we are going to purl these together, just like when we knitted in the round. And then we slip one yarn over. Purl one. Purl together. Here, this tail you will have to weave in later on. And then purl together. So here we are establishing, so to speak, the valleys of our ribs. So this here is the simple first real pattern row. And then here you slip that last stitch. Okay, so now comes the, second pattern row. So you stay on this end, and now there are a million different selvage stitches for two-colored brioche stitch, and they all have their pros and cons. For now, we'll keep things simple, and I'm just going to knit a simple garter stitch selvage. And then I'm gonna slip, so this is a single stitch, I'm gonna slip that with yarn held in front. And now you need to read your pattern. Okay, so this is a double stitch, but it has a purl bump at its base. So you purl it together. Slip one yarn over. So here, now the experience from knitting the brioche stitch in the round kicks in, and you can easily read your knitting and just, don't follow a pattern or so. Just look at your knitting, and if there is a bump here at the base, then you purl them together just so. And then we finish with a knit stitch. Again, we need to slide things back to the other end, pick up our second color, slip that first stitch. Okay, and now read your knitting again. Here we have a double stitch, but it has a V at its base. There is the V, so we knit it together. Maybe a little bit easier to see here. This is our next pattern row. And then here at the end, you slip that last stitch. Turn around, pick up the other color, and knit across. in the familiar brioche pattern. So in this case, here it's knit two together, slip one yarn over, because here there are those V's at the base of the brioche stitches, and there we go. These two stitches were kind of mixed up, and then finish with a knit stitch. Again, slide the stitches back, pick up the other color, slip, and then check here, these double stitches have a bump at its base, so you purl them together. Easy as that. So you will quickly notice that this is pretty slow going, but of course you are knitting each row twice, you are sliding stitches back and forth. It takes time, but I do feel it is just so rewarding. Here, this would be the other side. Kindly note how here these continue right into the cast on. See how there is not a single little purl bump. If you had used, or if we had used a normal long tail cast on, well, then you would have here a little bump here. Then also here, this is the selvage. I personally feel it looks rather nice. Of course, it's a garter stitch selvage. You have these bumps here, but I tried so many different cast-ons, and I personally feel that the garter stitch selvage looks neatest and cleanest. You can also do a slip stitch selvage. You can do I-cord selvages. I mean, you can basically add whatever selvage you want. I have a full tutorial on selvage stitches. I'll link to you up in here. My personal take is garter stitch actually looks best for two-colored brioche. Now, with all the talk about double knitting and knitting each row twice, you may be wondering, well, can I actually knit it in one pass, or do I really have to knit each row twice? Well, you don't. You can actually do it at the same time. Let me show you. So this is how I do it as a continental knitter. There are other methods out there, but this is one where you just tension the yarn the continental way. I believe the Sockmatician published this first here on YouTube. So you start by casting on an odd number of stitches any way you like. Then you knit your selvage stitches if you want to add one. And then you join in the new color. So I do it like so, but I flip here this color over so the strands are separate. And then you bring both yarns to the front and purl one stitch. And now comes the important bit. Now you bring both yarns here to the back, and this will create a double yarn over. And then you knit one stitch, but you knit from below, and then you will wrap the other yarn here around, and that's already the full trick. Then you bring both yarns to the front again, and create the double yarn over. Then you knit here this stitch from below, bring both to the front, and create a double yarn over. Knit from below, bring both to the front, and create a double yarn over. So this is the repeat for the first row. Sorry, camera lost focus there. Create one last yarn over here, but just one, and then I'm gonna knit my selvage stitch. and then you turn around. So, and the second row is just as well easy. It's the same repeat with one tiny little difference. So you start with your selvage stitch, and then you need to add one regular yarn over before you knit that first stitch together, before you, because this is a stitch here. This is a stitch you need to bark or knit together here in the purple yarn. This means there is no preceding purl together where you can wrap things around. That's the only reason why you need to start with a regular yarn over. And then you bring both colors to the front again. Purl one stitch, and if you don't lose your yarn, this will be a little bit easier. And then you wrap around. And again, you need to knit from below, ring to the front, purl here in the blue yarn. I get so easily distracted when I talk, but essentially, this is my selvage. Essentially, this is how you can do it, and then you can continue and use the repeat of the first row again. This is how you can do it. I need to be honest with you though. This technique I don't know, I just feel it's a flawed technique in a way. And this is coming from someone. So I'm currently working on these double knitting socks here, with double knitting ribbing here in these two colors on 1.75 millimeter needle. So I don't think it's my stitch definition or my technique. It's just that my brain can't cope. And I think my real issue is because all these stitches have the yarn over wrapped around, I can't really read my knitting. And when I can't read my knitting, then I'm screwed. I'm literally screwed. I can't follow a pattern when I can't read my knitting. So what I'm saying is here, try it out. Maybe it works for me. For me, it doesn't at all, but maybe it does for you. Our brains all work slightly differently. So give it a try. Okay, now I could go on and talk about such advanced techniques for another hour or so. I rather want to use our limited time here to focus on something a little bit more important and maybe a little bit more basic, increases and decreases. So, but they're super simple and nothing to be afraid of. So to increase stitches, you simply knit up to a position where you have one of these knit columns and there is a double stitch, a double stitch you need to knit together. And then you actually knit it together. However, you don't drop the yarn. Instead, you add a yarn over and then knit into the very stitch one more time. So it's a knit yarn over knit combination. So let's do that one more time, and I'm gonna space things out a little bit. So knit into the double stitch, do a bark, yarn over, and knit into that stitch one more time. So it's as easy as that. So we can do it one last time. Knit, yarn over, knit. It's that simple. Of course, you kind of need to pay attention when you knit across in the next color. So you kind of need to read your knitting. So my last stitch here was a purl two together. My last stitch here was a burr. This means my next stitch. So here is my increase. My next stitch is a slip yarn over. Then I would have to purl two together again, but there is no yarn over. So I just purl and then I slip yarn over again. So you are just sticking to your repeat and pretend, a bit like nothing happened. So here is another repeat. So I slip and yarn over. Now I would have to purl 2 together, but I can't. So I just purl. And that's basically the whole trick to increasing. Wasn't that easy? So here one more time. And if you are working in one color, you would be on the wrong side. Well, you just knit it. Then this purl stitch will appear as a knit stitch and you just knit it. It's really that simple. And in the next pass, there's nothing you need to worry about because then these stitches will have a yarn over. And then this here will be the result, so you get this nice and even increase. You can use the same general principle to create double increases. So let's show you how to do that. So just like before, you stop right when you come to a stitch where you need to knit 2 together in your main color, or knit a bark as it's called. Then you knit that together, yarn over, knit 2 together, and then you yarn over, knit 2 together one more time. I mean, theoretically speaking, you could also do, I don't know, a quadruple increase or so using the exact same principle, but typically you limit it to 2 increases. So again, knit into the stitch, yarn over, knit one more time, yarn over, and that's it. And then in the next pass, as you come across your increase, you just stick to your standard repeat. You just repeat what you've been doing all along. So my last stitch here was a purl 2 together. So I slip 1 yarn over, then I purl 1 because I can't purl 2 together. Then I slip 1 purlwise, yarn over, purl 1 and slip 1 purlwise before I continue in pattern. So the next row, I mean, you kind of need to pay attention to, but you just continue again. So slip 1 purlwise, purl 1, slip 1 purlwise, purl 1, slip 1 purlwise, and yarn over. So it's actually, remarkably simple. I think I split the yarn here. It's remarkably simple. So there is really, there are so many difficult increases in knitting, but brioche increases are, if you ask me, not among them. So a couple of rows later, you can really see how beautiful these brioche increases can be. This here almost looks a little bit like flowers, I guess. So there is this one central ridge and then it forks out. You might also notice that here these double increases, they leave behind quite a big little eyelet here. So when it comes to 2-colored brioche where you plan a lot of increases and decreases, always consider going down at least 1 needle size. Otherwise these eyelets will become very, very dominating. In a way they can also be ornamental, but typically you go down a needle size. And another thing you will notice, so here on the wrong side, of course, these ridges are not forking out anymore. Here they start basically in the middle of nowhere. It's not totally awful, but still, normally brioche is a fully reversible pattern, but once you start increasing and decreasing, there will be one side that's going to be the pretty side. So plan ahead right from the start. Plan which color is going to be my dominant color, my main color, and which color will be the contrast color, the color where the increases don't look as neat. Now, we covered increases, let's talk about decreases as well. Now, brioche decreases are sadly a tiny little bit more complicated, but actually they aren't. So that's why I want to show you something. So in knitting, you are probably aware there are left and right leaning decreases. So a popular left leaning decrease is SSK. And a popular right leaning decrease is of course knit two together. Now in brioche, you need to decrease both layers at the same time, front and back. So you can also knit an SSK like this. You can slip one, knit one, pass over, and you can knit and knit two together like so. Knit one, pass over, like so. The result will be the exact same stitch, just a little trick, and we are going to use this passover trick for our brioche decreases. So if you take a look at the swatch, then I want to decrease all the stitches that I've previously increased. And here on the right side, obviously I want a left leaning decrease. I want this little outlier here to merge back into the main ridge. And here on the left side, we need a right leaning decrease because I want this branch here to lean back into the main ridge. And then of course there's also center double decreases. Let's start with the left leaning decreases here on the right side. So first you knit up to the position where your decrease should start. So here I want this ridge to merge into this ridge here, so this is why I stop here before this double stitch this bark. And first I'm going to slip it knitwise. This will twist it around so this blue bit will end up laying on top. And then the next stitch should be a knit stitch, purl stitch here, and another double stitch, and you knit that double stitch together with the purl stitch like so, and then you pass the last double stitch over, and there is your decrease. Let's do that one more time. Again, stop right at the little ridge you want to decrease, slip it knitwise, slip both the yarn over and the stitch knitwise, and then here this double stitch and the purl stitch, knit it together. So it's rather a knit three together, or it feels like a knit three together, and then lift over. There is your decrease. So actually it's rather simple, isn't it? A right leaning decrease in brioche knitting is almost as simple. Okay, so again you stop here on the right side. So this is the ridge we want to reduce, and we want to merge it with this. So you stop here right before this side. This is important. Then you slip this double stitch knitwise, and then you knit the purl stitch here in the middle. Then you pass this double stitch here over. Then you slip this stitch here back to the left needle to pass over this stitch, the main ridge that should end up here on top. That's how you do it. Let's do that one more time. So again, this here is the ridge we want to decrease. So I stop here right at the ridge where I want this to merge into. Then I slip these two stitches knitwise, knit one stitch, pass these two here over, then I slip this stitch here back to the left needle and pass this over, and there is your right leaning brioche decrease. And then you just continue knitting across. Now we still have these two double decreases here in the middle left. I called them flowers earlier. And of course I want to decrease them as well. So what about a double decrease? Well, you knit right up to the position where the the structure you want to decrease with a double decrease start. So here right in front, this double stitch. And the way you should think of this is, we are going to pick one central stitch, this stitch, and then we are going to, from the outside, we are going to toss stitches over that central stitch, and at the last step we are going to toss this central stitch over. So yeah, let's just do this. So we are going to slip 2 stitches knitwise. Then you need a cable needle, and you slip that double stitch here to the cable needle. Then you knit 1 stitch. Then you pass over 1 stitch. This should be a single stitch. Then you slip that stitch over, pass that part here, that double stitch over, slip the stitch back, pass the right side over, and then we can slip here our central stitch back, and in the last step you pass that over as well. A lot of passing around, but there is our central double brioche decrease. Now there's one last little topic we need to talk about, and this is probably the topic that keeps most knitters from knitting the brioche stitch. So, and that is fixing mistakes. So maybe you take a look at your knitting and then you notice, okay, here there is a mistake, and there are a couple of ways to fix things. So let me get started. Method number 1, if you notice a mistake, a couple of stitches back or just 1 row below, well, you can always think, so knit backwards. So you basically just retrace your steps. So see here these stitches, all the stitches with the yarn over wrapped around, well, those were just slipped and the others were. So you just go back like this. Go slowly, and once you come to the mistake, you knit in the other direction. Now sometimes you drop stitches and this happens. Well, what do? Well, in this case, just try to pick up whatever you can. Well, so theoretically speaking, you need to pick it up like that. But sometimes things unravel and you can't anymore. Well, then just try to pick up whatever you can rescue. So remember, the base of brioche stitch are those knit and purl stitches, and you just pick up the last loop that you can find. So don't bother about any yarn overs or whatever. Just try to secure those. The yarn overs cannot really unravel. Just try to find those little loops, these remnants from purl stitches, and then you simply knit backwards and try to come to a point where you only have, a good combination of double stitch and a single stitch left on your knitting needle, and then you simply knit that row or round again. When it comes to brioche knitting, your best friend will also be lifelines. So at the end of circular knitting needles, and you can use circular knitting needles to do the brioche stitch, there is such a little hole here. And you can use this hole here to pull through a fishing line. You can also do, dental floss or so, whatever, or some spare yarn, whatever fits through. And then you simply pick up your yarn again and knit across. Just knit across, and as you knit across, you will drag the fishing line along. So I'm gonna knit across this row here to show you the result. And then at the end of the row, if you're in the round or so, this will happen continuously. You can just pull things through, and there is your lifeline here, and you just continue knitting. And I mean, it's very difficult for you to see, but this lifeline will stay put when you continue knitting, and then you can always unravel to that spot. So if you drop your stitches or so, you always have this, well, a safe point or so, where you know, okay, even if I drop all stitches, they won't unravel past this point. So see, this is how, so suppose you drop things, then this would be the result. And then you can carefully pick up your knitting needle. You can actually keep the lifeline in place and pick up stitches. Now again, these yarn overs, they are only, well, a little bit difficult to spot. But I mean, if you don't pick up every yarn over, it doesn't matter. You can easily, so there should be yarn overs that are wrapped around the yarn, around the lifeline, and then there are those yarn overs that are crossing it. But it doesn't really matter. Just again, pick up whatever you can, and even if you make a mistake, well, you know, you can unravel, knit backwards one more round. So here, because you know, these lifelines, it's gonna be tricky, you know, but just, or here where things almost unraveled, it doesn't matter, just pick up whatever you need. Keep the lifeline in the stitches as you pick things up. And then take one more row or round, and then you're gonna be good. See? Now sometimes you drop a stitch, or there is a yarn over wrapped around the wrong way or something like that. And in these cases, it feels kind of wasteful to think all the way back or use your lifeline or so, because you know, that's an awful lot of work wasted and an awful lot of time. But you can actually fix simple mistakes with a crochet hook. Now, first of all, before you do anything, always secure the dropped stitch with a stitch marker. Then slide the stitches still on the knitting needle further in so they don't drop. And then you can go hunting for your crochet hook. Now, here we have an awful mess in front of us, so what can we do? So, there are two kinds of strands here bridging the gap. There are short strands here like this one, and those are connected to the purl ridges here to the side. And then you have longer strands like this one here, and if you pull on the longer strand, you might notice they are here connected to this ridge and this ridge. We want to fix knit stitches here, so we need the strands connected to this ridge. However, we can't just pull it through and let it back up. We need to catch the yarn over. So, sitting right at the, well, neck, or the neck here of this stitch, there should be one little strand here firmly wrapped around. You are going to ignore this. Instead, you will go below the two strands here. 1, 2. Sort things out if things are a mess first. You go below that, and then you pull the first or the lowest strand here connected to the side all the way through. So you go below both stitches, and then we can ladder back up, so to speak. So now this rung here sits here right at the back of my stitch. We are going to ignore it. Instead, we will go below the next two stitches or strands and pull those through. So you always go below 2, and then you are back up. Now here, this last thing, that's a yarn over. So you need to rescue that, because you will need it to, in this case, bark things together or knit things together, but that's how you fix it. So that wasn't too scary, and it really doesn't matter if it's two colors or one color. It's the exact same technique. And should you drop a stitch here on the purl side, well, turn things around and fix things here on the knit side where things are easy. In two colors, things are even easier. So just in case you're wondering, because now things are even color coded. So just pull through here the yarn in the there we go. You always need to make sure that you don't accidentally end up with a twisted stitch. So pay attention here that these stitches are not twisted. If it ends up twisted, you know, just turn it around. Anyway, that was my, well, grand brioche stitch tutorial. I hope I was able to show you how to knit the brioche stitch, how to knit it in two colors in the round, how to increase, decrease, how to knit neat selvages, and so much more. I'm pretty sure you are prepared for your first big brioche pattern now. And if you still have any questions, well, then comment below. Happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.